Boom. Dr. Keegan, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks, Chris. How are you?
Yes, I'm well, mate, because I went to see Crowded House, didn't I?
Yeah, I'd seen that. Prometheus Beard had mentioned it that you've been to see them.
Yes, it was first band I ever went to see. I think in concert certainly back in oh god 1989. I think about then maybe 1990ish. Um, and they were playing down in Cornwall, so we thought, yeah, let's go and see them. It was yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? These bands, mate, they're all having a renaissance because it's only people like our age that go out anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And there's no like musicians anymore. There was nobody plays instruments as well. I think that's or very few people do. I think that's half the problem.
It's all going to be dying, isn't it? Because people don't what go and listen to music. They don't watch films. They're certainly not going to go to the theatre or the opera, and everyone's just on TikTok scrolling 30-second videos.
That's the attention span now, isn't it? People have like is it like 20-second attention span or something? If you don't catch them within that 20 seconds, it's gone. They move on to the next.
What did you say, mate? You spoke for 23 seconds then. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I lost my focus. Yes, it was funny. It was only after we saw Crowded House, who were really good, by the way. It was yeah, there's only a few of their tracks that I thought were really beautiful back in the day, and they played them all, and so it was quite good. I think they played some of their new stuff. But then someone said that they were COVID Nazis, and so I started to feel guilty that I'd
Yeah.
patronised these bloody fascists, but um, no, I didn't really. But I, it turns out I don't think they were. I think their lead singer was quote unquote tested positive, and they had to cancel a few concerts back in the day. I don't know. I don't obviously haven't been on their social media or anything, but
I hadn't seen nothing about them. I used to like them myself back in the day, but and I almost went to see them. I'd missed it. I'd seen that they were on a few days before, and then I'd seen they were going to Cornwall. And I don't know why Prometheus Beard he mentioned something about you'd seen them, so I was gutted because I did used to like some of the early stuff was really good. I don't know whether I'd like the newer stuff. I'm not sure about, but yeah, but I haven't been keeping abreast of them, so I don't know what their opinions are really.
no, it just made me think. What should our stance be? Because there were some people back in the day. They were really bad, weren't they? I mean, banning their audience from coming, all these bloody passports on the phone, and forcing people to, undertake a certain thing.
People like Adele, people forget how bad the likes of Adele was. She was absolutely ruthless with it. I think didn't she call for people to get out of her concerts during? She'd like ask for people to turn on people who weren't vaccinated and stuff like that. It's just crazy times.
Yeah, you
Yes.
think you've got power. You look at like Pol Pot in Cambodia, and people just go along with shit, don't they? Because they're told by the television or whatever. Not that I think they had many televisions in Cambodia back then, but or like the was it Rwanda, the Hutsis and the Tutsis all turned on each other because of a radio station. You'd think people would come on a bit, wouldn't you? But
Yeah, you would. And since like the Second World War, did you see? I don't know where you stand on Jordan Peterson or Peterson, whatever his name is, but I watched somebody had shared a clip on Facebook the other day, and he'd said about when people think back to the Second World War, they always imagine themselves as Oscar Schindler. They would be the ones that would stop it. He said, but in reality, who were the ones who were enforcing the measures? It's these people who think have this positive mental image of themselves. But realistically, it was these people who were pushing it on us, who were reporting the neighbours. There was a woman who I heard of who was getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning with a notepad so she could take down registration plates to make sure people weren't going out when you shouldn't be going out. It's just people are quick to forget that happened as well, I think. You really are.
Yes. I would say to people that if you want to live an enlightened life, there's two things you need to understand. First off is you got to see through these war narratives. They're not what people think, and the other is, funny enough, I'm talking to a doctor. It's the health narrative. It's a shame that we actually can't speak about it on this platform, but I'm 54, haven't been ill for 23 years. And I know that diet is something we're going to talk about, and when you live through something like the last 3 years, or it's probably 4 years now, and diet isn't even mentioned.
Yeah.
Exercise isn't even mentioned. The damage that carbohydrates do to our body and our health isn't even mentioned. Sports halls and gyms are shut down. You got to understand all this stuff. You can't just go along with all this. You got to be able to see for what's going on. But anyway, we let's just first let me just say massive thank you for your book. Not Your Usual Doctor Magnesium. Massive congratulations, and thank you for sending me a signed copy. I thought we could just chat today and sort of dip in and out of it. First of all, the COVID measures. What were we going to say about that, Lee? Well, over to you.
So in the book, there's a lot about COVID, because obviously the book covers a period from 2013 to modern day, basically. So a large section of that is basically what's been happening in the last 3 or 4 years. And I was living through that. I was working through that. I was in charge of wards, certain wards, and I watched it firsthand. I seen what was going on firsthand at the time. And so my initial instinct, so the first thing I thought when people talked about there was this virus coming in and it was gonna cause devastation, we needed to protect people, we need to protect the elderly population by implementing measures. The first thing I thought at the time, I'm an acute medical doctor, but I was also working in frailty at the time. And the first thing I was thinking of was, we're going to push elderly people, or people who are almost getting towards that threshold for frailty, into frailty. So we're condensing down the 65 to 75, 80 population, and we're squashing them together. So by encouraging them to sit at home, to not get out into the fresh air, to not mobilize, to eat what they can get, basically what they can get delivered. It was a perfect storm for me to basically escalate that frailty, push all these elderly patients together. Frailty is the biggest cause of pathology, so it's the biggest driver for illness. Frailty is the biggest cause of death in humans and any animals, because old age is basically frailty. So all we did, we condensed that down and we filled the hospitals up full of patients who were essentially frail. And you can't get them patients out. We don't have any social beds for them. We don't have enough social workers. We have no funding in the social pot for them. So we basically got them, we stuck them all in hospital. We escalated frailty, we shortened the lives of these people, and we fill the hospitals up and fill the beds up, so we now can't get people who needed to come in. So that was my first thought. That was my initial thought when I heard the measures. Which is, I do go on to explain a little bit more detail. I don't want to go on about it too much, but I have a theory called a low-hanging fruit theory, which is you'd have a tree with a low-hanging fruit at the bottom is the ripe fruit that's ready to fall off the tree. That represents the frailty population. And you'd have the more young apples up, which are firmer. And all we did is we packed our tree full of ripe fruit. So as you know, ripe fruit will fall off a tree quite easily, and that's the same with frailty. Frailty kills people. So if you have a truck that goes past, the vibrations of the truck's enough to knock a fruit off, a gust of wind, a bird landing on a branch. And that's the exact same with frailty. Anything that comes along is going to knock them off the tree. It's going to kill them because they don't have that functional reserve to fight the infection. And they're more prone to getting infections because they sit still. If they sit still, they become constipated. The valves fill up, it pushes on the bottom of the lungs, squashes the lungs down, they get infections. It causes them to go into urinary retention. So the urine sits in the bladder, you get urine infections. So it has so many implications, frailty and immobility, really. So that was my first thought when I thought about when I heard about these measures coming in. So I don't want to ramble on, Chris, but yeah, that's
mate, you're doing great. What about the midazolam and all that? For some reason, I thought that was on the hospital wards, and then someone said to me, "No, that was just the care homes." So
no, so midazolam's a normal part of the end of life pathway medications. So in the UK, they use levomepromazine, which is an anti-sickness but also relaxes. They give morphine or oxycodone for pain. They give midazolam for agitation. I've missed one out. Or hyoscine hydrochloride or glycopyrronium to dry up the upper airway secretions. So when a patient's coming towards end of life and we're not for any active treatments, then we initiate the end of care or the end of life pathway, and then medications are the standard part of that pathway. I think what it was in the UK, people were saying that there was an increase in midazolam within care homes because more people were getting put on end of life in care homes because they weren't bringing patients to the hospital. So basically, we had people in nursing homes who people were going out and saying these patients can't no longer come into hospital. So they were being left to become palliative patients within the community. So that's seen an increase in these end of life drugs within the community. And I was always a bit baffled why people chose midazolam, because I've read a lot about the midazolam. Like, I don't even want to say the words because I don't want to get your channel flagged up. But for me, I think morphine would be the biggest driver towards hastening people's end of life, basically, because it dampens down your respiratory drive. I think I was always surprised why people chose midazolam, why people weren't saying, well, there's a big, massive rise in morphine in the community, because I think morphine's probably the thing that escalates it quicker than midazolam. Midazolam's just an anti-agitation agent, really, from what I see.
Yeah, the sort of flag there was if you got a quote unquote respiratory disorder, like the last thing you want is to be administered a drug that's going to suppress your respiratory system, and morphine obviously does. That's why you have heroin overdoses, isn't it? Is you take so much and you physically, your breathing becomes so shallow, and then it just stops.
It takes the drive away to breathe. It lowers your respiratory rate down. But I think I genuinely, I'm not trying to be part of any cover up or anything, but I have never worked in the community. I've never been a GP. I'm a hospital doctor. I've always worked in hospitals. So I don't see what goes on in the community, but I do know of what the rationale behind it was, or what the theory of the rationale behind it was. It was when people become end of life. So rather than, I think the scandal for me was the fact that they were saying these people can't come into hospital. That's the biggest scandal from my point of view, because it happened to me nan. My own nan died in a nursing home during the pandemic of the big C, apparently. She had no respiratory symptoms, and she didn't require any oxygen. She'd had a urinary tract infection, which nobody had come out to treat. The GP wouldn't come out, so I contacted the GP myself and asked them to go in and see her. Started on antibiotics, but by then she was dementia, she was progression of frailty, and it was too late. But for me, the big scandal is why these patients were left in the nursing homes rather than the medications that they administered in the nursing home, really.
Wasn't there? Well, I saw somewhere that under Matt Hancock they'd ordered in huge amounts of this midazolam.
Well, it would have been. So when he got the orders in. It would have been with morphine as well. So they come in fours. So it's morphine or oxycodone if they've got renal failure. And then it would be levomepromazine or cyclizine for the anti-sickness effect, midazolam, and hyoscine hydromide or glycopyrronium. So it's 4 drugs they would have ordered in. So it would be mass. I think that's what I couldn't understand about the midazolam scandal. People chose one drug, and I don't know why they chose midazolam, because for me, if it was me looking outside, I'd be saying, well, why are they ordering so much morphine rather than midazolam? Because it would have all come in together, you see, because it comes as a package. When we put people on drivers, we often put 2 of them in each driver, or sometimes 3. So the big orders of midazolam would have come with big orders of the other medications as well.
Yes. Yeah, you look back at that period. I mean, what did you think working in a hospital? These supposed to be like a national crisis. It's people are tearing themselves to pieces at home, you know, cooped up like chickens, probably with people that they're quite glad that go out to work so they don't have to spend that much time with each other. You got trying to educate the kids. Got alcoholism like on the rise, everyone working from home or pretending to or trying to and doing everything over Zoom, and then you got all this government money being spent on PPE equipment, and then we had the TikTok videos. Did you ever?
It was dancing. That definitely wouldn't have been me, Chris. No. that's not my thing, dancing. But so during the initial stages of the pandemic, it was empty. Hospitals were completely empty. I've never seen anything like it, because people weren't coming into hospital. People were avoiding hospital like the plague, basically, because they were all convinced that if they come to hospital, they were going to die of COVID. But as it went on, so initially I seen it was just dead. So it's just no one there. Then we started to get, for me, the biggest worry about lockdown was you started to get the immediate frailties in, and then you got the people late presentations. So people who would have chest pain, and instead of phoning an ambulance because they didn't want to go into hospital, they'd sit on it for a day or 2 days, and then they'd come in, they'd be in complete heart failure, where they might have just needed a stent or some medication, but they left it late. So we're getting a lot of late presentations. They come in, got a lot of cancers in, absolutely loads of cancers. Because initially it would have been because people were missing the 2-week waits. They cancelled all the 2-week waits. So in the UK, we used to have a brilliant, I mentioned this in the book as well. So in the UK, before all this happened, I'd probably give devastating news of end-stage cancer as an acute medical doctor probably 2 or 3 times maybe, because we wouldn't see it. You very rarely get it, because patients would have been diagnosed early. They'd been going through the treatments, and then we see them when they're getting the treatments. So when they're getting the chemo or the radiotherapy or immunotherapy, whatever, that's when we tend to see them, because they're getting the side effects of the medications they're being given. But what I started to see, and what I noticed a big difference in, was like stage 4 cancers as a first presentation. So you're getting, there's a story about a lady in the book who came with, she'd had chest pain for a few months, I think it was. And she'd been coming in thinking she was having a heart attack at first, and that was excluded. Then they thought she had a PE, and I got asked to see her when they thought she had a PE. So I asked to do, her liver function was completely deranged. So I'd asked to do an ultrasound scan, and we seen loads of shadows on the liver. So I asked for a CT scan, and she was absolutely riddled with cancer. And this was like a first presentation, and I'd never seen anything like that before. And this was before all the secondary measures, all the other things come in, because I know people are talking about these hypercancers and stuff now, but this was before all that. It was at the very start. And well, it was a few months in, like, but yeah, so that for me, that was unusual, because you didn't normally see that. As an acute doctor, you don't normally see that. So I was seeing early stages of that. And I remember at the time, I don't know whether you remember this, Chris, they used to run cancer deaths alongside COVID deaths on the daily updates. Did you ever notice that? It was always alongside early on.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about. I just got my own interpretation of it can we say, which is I just ignore all of it, Lee, because I know the truth. I know what makes people ill.
Yeah,
It's the one thing they never talked about. I call it bogeyman theory. If you believe it's other people are responsible for your well-being, that's just because we've had a lifetime of indoctrination, right
yeah,
from when we was kids at school. You know, someone's got a
definitely.
runny nose, they get locked in the cupboard. Not literally, but you know, don't come to school. I wish we could. What we'll do, mate, we'll go over to locals in a moment, if that's all right, and we'll just chat freely there. So, folks, if you want that part of the chat, there's our locals platform link is running along the bottom of the screen, or it's in the description box below. Completely free, folks. Our locals, but yeah,
Yeah, I have some interesting theories on that myself, to be honest. And I know I don't want to get your channel in trouble, but I've got a few interesting theories about that cancer development and stuff, and why that escalated and stuff that we can talk about later. Yeah.
absolutely. So, in no particular order, let's talk about your alcohol free.
Yeah. So, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say I try to be, Lee. There's no sort of bones about it, really. It's just a better way of living. I think an issue for people like myself is it's when them occasional parties crop up. They get fewer and far between as you get older, anyway. You know, and you know, I get invited to some good sort of gigs. You know, few old friends, all this sort of stuff, and it's problematic because the little angel or the devil on your shoulder, whichever one it is like, yeah, go on, just a bit, you know, just a few bit. It's really and it always turns into a bit of an episode for me. So, yeah, I just wanted to, let's talk about it. Why are so many people now going AF alcohol free?
So you touched on that little devil on your shoulder. That's kind of how I got into this AVRT technique for alcohol, to avoid alcohol. So I don't know is the answer for why so many people are going alcohol free. I think it's a generational thing with these new, what do they call them, Gen Zs or something. I think they tend not to drink. It's they like to be in control. They like to they're very image conscious, aren't they? And they like to have the right coffee cups, and they like the right pictures for the social media. So I think it doesn't kind of fit in with their life, losing control. I think that's a big driver, and that's a big driver for alcohol free, which I've reaped the benefits of because I have stopped drinking. There's so many alcohol free, and because I love the taste of lager. It's like if I could choose any drink, I would choose lager because I love it. So that's the thing I found hardest about giving up alcohol, was that I'd missed the taste. But now there's that many good alcohol free drinks out there, and that's because of this Generation Z, or whatever they call them, where they've pushed it. There's loads of micro breweries and independent breweries who are making, and you can't distinguish between a good IPA and some of these mushroom kind of alcohol frees that they have. But I think from my point of view, I agree with you, because I think it's a destructive thing ultimately if you drink. I think I was losing control of me drinking, really. I think I was in that acceptable alcoholic cycle that I think most of the UK is in, where we think we're not alcoholics, but we clearly are, because most people drink every Friday night, every Saturday, have a few cures on a Sunday, have an hangover Monday, Tuesday, go out on a Wednesday to watch the football, so have a few more pints, and that's every week. And it's you're either like hungover or you're drunk for the whole week. And that's what I found. I had my daughter, who I know we're going to talk a bit more about in a bit, but when I had her later, because I'm like 46, my daughter's 6, so I had her as a 40-year-old. And I thought, I don't want it be in that cycle of ruining, because I've got a 24-year-old son as well, and I'd been an ex-soldier, being a bit of a lunatic. When I was younger, I was a party animal and stuff, and he'd witnessed that. He'd witnessed me falling asleep on the floor and stuff like that, and when I got home after the session, and I thought, I don't want my daughter to see that now, and that was my biggest drive. I didn't want to be too hungover to do anything with my daughter, and I didn't want her to see me in that state, and to lose control. And I was starting to lose control of myself when I drank as well. I was getting angrier, and I think that leads back to my childhood, and also to where I grew up. And I think it's the forces as well, where you'd have anger in you, don't you? It takes a while to get over that. And I think, again, as I'm not just keeping plugging my book, but I talk about that in it, where I talk about the kind of what I brought into medicine, and the demons that I already had before I went into medicine. And I think most soldiers go into the forces with a lot of them demons. Really, most of us actually go in with them, and that's the drive. I went in the forces because I was fighting every day. I was in gangs, I was in trouble all the time, I was fighting, and I thought, I was boxing a young kid, and I thought my way out is to join the Marines, because my granddad was a Marine. His granddad was a Marine. His granddad was nominated for Victoria Cross in the Marines, and so it was like our family thing was the Marines. So I went to join the Marines. Got scammed and ended up in the RF regiment, which I'm glad about, though, because I think if I'd joined the Marines, I would have boxed, and I probably wouldn't have got out. And I think for me, the right thing with the forces was to go in, get my head together, get away from the crowd that I was with, let everything pass by, and then come back out and settle down. And that's what I did. But it doesn't mean that you come out of it any less tarnished as a person. And I found I was getting worse when I was getting older, and the further away I've been out the forces, which is mad, because I had a successful career. I was doing well in my career. I'm married, I've got a settled family life, but I seemed to be getting worse as I got older, in terms of like angrier when I was drinking. And it was bizarre the way it was happening. I don't know whether I was kind of facing up to things that might have happened in the past, and they were coming out at that time. But I decided to turn it around and to get a grip, and I haven't drank for 9 months now.
Yes, good effort. I had a chap called Steve Brown on the podcast. He's former para. He's written quite a few books now, and he said something which just reminded me of our mentality when we were in the forces. And he said, for years he'd walk down the street, and anyone coming the other way, any bloke, he said he's already like, I was going to say eyeing him up. That's not what I mean. But he's already getting a fix on him. He's weighing up his character. He's thinking, right. And he says, Chris, I'm looking at these blokes. They're just innocent blokes walking down the street, and I'm already thinking, like, how can I put them in intensive care? How can I? If this guy starts on me, I mean, and it really like made me think. Yeah, that's what I was like. I mean, I wasn't probably to that thing, but you did. If you had like an incident when you're driving, you're like, right, you're just all prepared to just go into extreme violence, basically. Bit mad, that, isn't it?
But I think I was talking to someone about this. You brutalised, aren't you, on basic training? Like, we did 6 months basic training. The whole idea of basic training is to prepare you because with infantry, is to prepare you to kill, isn't it? You haven't got any other role. You're not like a driver, you're not logistics. You're just there to kill people, aren't you? That's the only job you've got. So the idea of your basic training is to get you into that situation where they can flick a switch, and you do that, isn't it? And I think, even though I also remember coming back from Bosnia, and I was going to put this in my book, but I didn't. And my wife talked me out of putting it in, because she said she didn't think it was relevant, and she didn't think it would paint me in a good light. But I remember coming back from Bosnia, and we'd we'd been sent home on R&R. I've been in Bosnia for like 7 months, 8 months, something like that. And we'd come back, and I'd been home for 2 weeks. And then we come back to Cornwall and went out in Truro. We just moved back to the Nuki from Germany. I was living in Germany at the time. And we went out on the ale, and me and 3 other lads. And we went into a pub, and he was like a rugby team in the pub. And straight away, I always had that kind of thing. I'm 5'7", so I always wanted to fight the biggest person to prove myself, because I always had that complex about being 5'7". So if you go throw me in a room and I'd had to drink when I was younger, I'd want to fight the biggest person in the room. I was like Scrappy Doo or something. So I had that mentality where, so then we go in anyway, of course, murdered, the 4 of us in this pub, get kicked out. And then we're walking along the road, and the police come, and one of my mates, we used to call him Little Shit as his nickname, he was up at a scaffold, and the police told him to get down. So then as he got down, the police said, you've just been urinating on a war memorial. So we're like, oh, come on, mate, we're soldiers, we clearly wouldn't urinate on a war memorial. So they were trying like egg us on, and one of the police punched me, mate, and I lost it, completely lost it. Woke up in a cell the next day, but nearly ruined my life. If it wouldn't have been for the CCTV, if the policeman punching me, mate, I probably would have been in jail, and I would have never been where I am today. But it was that switch. It was that trigger, literally, that one punch to me, mate, and I lost, completely lost the plot, because I've been drinking. And I think they put that in you. They send you home, and then they say, there you go back into the normal world, now you're fine. Go and live like a normal person. Don't let the brutalisation that you've had for the last year, just forget all that now, that's fine, you know what I mean? And it's like, we used to work with the US Marines in Bosnia, and they used to go on like 2-week holidays to a beach resort somewhere on the way home, and they like get counselling and everything. And you're like, we were just sent home, so go ahead, go home, and then go and live your normal life. And how can you do that? You know what I mean? You can't do that, can you? It's impossible. You can't prime yourself, and that's where PTSD is. You're so triggered. I haven't got PTSD, but virtually every single mate I know from the forces has got PTSD and suffered with mental health problems. I don't think I've got a friend who hasn't either committed suicide or been under some kind of placement in a mental health institute or lived on the streets. Every single one of them, all the same. And it's because that they put that trigger in you, don't they? And you're at a hyper state of alertness. You're walking down the street, as you said about that para, mate of yours. You're looking at you, you're thinking, if he tries anything, yeah, I'm going to go first, I'm going to get in there first. It's a heightened state of alertness that you're always on, just waiting for that flick to switch. And that's because that's what they do to you. They're not stupid. They've been doing this for hundreds of years to us, haven't they? And this is what they've done to us. And then this is why so many of us suffer when we get out.
Yes. Do you think there's a link then between what you see on a hospital ward, you know, a lot of death and a lot of horrible stuff, and being in the military?
100%. It's so similar. The job of an acute doctor and an infantry soldier is, it sounds mad to say this, but it's such a similar job. You've got, I read, have you ever read, I think it's called Armageddon, 1944 to 1945. It's written by an American general. It's about the last year of the war. It's about the Americans and the British in the last year of the war, Second World War. And he said about there was a reluctance from the soldiers to fight in the last year of the war, because they knew the war was over and they didn't want to die. He said, so you had like these troops, and if it wasn't for the Russians, the war would have never progressed, because you couldn't get them to fight, because they knew that the war was just about to finish. They're like, I don't want to die in the last months of the war. So there was a reluctance. And he said, you had 2 groups of soldiers. When they come under enemy fire, you had the soldiers that ran, perpetual motion towards the guns, ducking, moving, weaving, getting behind the trees. And you had the others who get down, take cover, crawl a couple of yards, get down, and are trying to protect themselves. And and you get like, he said he'd rather have 10 of the first soldiers than 1,000 of the second, because they survive. They move you forward and they survive. The others die along the way. And that, as mad as it sounds, that's exactly what being an acute medical doctor is. When you walk into an arrest situation, you get two types of doctors. You get the doctors who start fishing for the ABG in the wrist and start looking around for things to do, things to switch on and volunteer for chest compressions. And you get the other type who fly in, say, come here, let's get it, then let's organise everything, let's get on the chest, someone get in the airway, someone to tank. And it's that kind of, if you're a good soldier, a good infantry soldier, makes a good, that personality makes a good acute doctor, I think. It's very, very similar.
So, I mean, doctors are renowned for drinking a lot, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Is that because...
Can you still turn off this screen?
No, you're fine.
Okay, cheers. Yeah, they are, because of the same stresses, and I think pilots are as well, aren't they?
Yes, bit of a bad job to have a drinking problem, isn't it?
It definitely is, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Can you tell us, I mean, you don't have to, but you must have seen some unpleasant things. Have you had to break the news then that someone's lost a loved one?
Many, many times, yeah. It's part of the job, unfortunately. So, again, I feel like I'm just proper plugging my book, but I'm not.
No. You're on it. I mean, you've written a book.
Yeah.
It's going to be a side of life a lot of people have never got their head around. You're very open-minded. You're forward-thinking, and yeah, by all means, plug your book, mate. I'm showing a copy of it now.
I can't see anything. You've gone off, Chris. I can only see myself, so I can't see what you're doing.
Yeah, no, just stay as you are. Otherwise, we might screw something up. But yes, Dr. Magnesium. Not your usual doctor. There you go. We'll put a link for it below, folks. But yeah. As I was saying, it's that you see it in the films, don't you, and the documentaries that, and it's just like, oh my God, you wouldn't wish that task on anyone.
So that's the reason I mentioned the book then, is because that's what it explores. The book, the whole point of the book, really, it's a story about my life and how I got into medicine, and how it's so unusual that somebody from my background got into medicine in the first place. Really, it's a bit of a mad journey to get into medicine. But once I'm there, the book is about the psychological effects of a job in medicine on the doctor, and about how it pushes you to the edge. It does really, it's the exact same as we were talking about the military. It's the same kind of thing. It pushes you to the edge, because being surrounded by personal tragedy so much, and it's not the patients often, it's the families as well, and it's the devastating effect it has on the families, and it explores the self-protective mechanism that you have to employ as a doctor in order to stop you having permanent depression or some kind of mental health breakdown, because you do. I've broke bad news hundreds of times, and I've witnessed personal tragedy on so many occasions that I can't even recall them all. But it's a protective mechanism. It's the kind of the psychological self-preservation of going somewhere else. And there's that lady had quite an impact on me that I spoke about to you before, about the lady with the liver cancer, who was one of the first I ever broke that devastating news to, about her having liver cancer. She was early 50s, this lady. And I remember I said to her, it was during the COVID measures, so you couldn't have relatives in the building with you. You have to go in on your own. And I knew I had to break this news to her, because I'd seen the scans and I knew it was not good and it was going to be terminal. So I asked her, did she have anyone with her in the car park? And she said, yeah, she had her husband out there. And she said, why have I got cancer? So I was like, in a corridor, we had people walking past, and I'm like, well, just bring your husband in, because I want to make sure that you take everything Kim was saying, and it's better to have someone there. I said, I'm dying, aren't I? So you're like, well, just bring your husband in and we'll bring him in. And I've done this so many times before in my career. And I brought them into the family room, and the husband come in and he sat down, and I brought a nurse in with me at the time, who was one of my friends. She's from Liverpool as well. And I brought her in to provide empathy for me, because I'd done this so many times. I'd learned to switch off, and I always just used to go somewhere else. I'd just go back into my mind, and I'd just deliver it on autopilot, even though you're trying to show that you've got emotion and that you feel empathy for the person. You do go into like a kind of a autopilot. So I was sitting there giving this bad news, and then something happened to me. I had like an urge to feel. I was like, and I described this again in the book in detail. It's like something come over me, and I was like, feel. You need to feel. And I'd been through a horrendous few years. Like, my daughter had been really unwell. I'd been in the hospital with her. She'd almost died. She was like, I got told she had a 30% chance to get to 1. I went to a hospital that was failing, and I was working like 19 days in a row. I was suffering badly with my mental health at the time. I was really, really struggling. I was having dark thoughts. I was going through really bad times. And I'd kind of just come out of that the other side. And I'd learned to protect myself. So something inside just said, you need to feel. And I felt the overwhelming urge to feel. And it was like I was pulled from outside into the TV, the kind of the drama of it all. And I realised what she was saying, that the woman, she was crying her eyes out, and she was saying, I'm not going to be there for the baby. So I later found out, well, I actually found out at the time, because she told us that a daughter was pregnant. I think she was 7 months pregnant, and she was worried that she wasn't worried about dying for herself. It was the impact it was going to have on her daughter who was pregnant, and the fact that she wouldn't see the first. She only had one daughter, and this was her first grandchild. And it was like an overwhelming feeling of guilt and sadness for the person that experienced. And it was like, this is where it all culminates, the book. This is where it finishes off, that maybe there is hope. Maybe for doctors, maybe for ex-soldiers, maybe there is hope still. Maybe that we can get out unscathed. Maybe we can get through it and come out normal on the other side.
Yeah, it's a interesting topic, mate. I mean, yeah, I was a substance misuse specialist for I was a substance misuse specialist for 3 years in a clinic in the in the community, and several times during that 3 years the phone went, and it was, Chris, is so and so your client? Yeah, he died last night. In fact, they found him on his bed covered in vomit and all this. Sorry, friends, I should have given you a warning before saying that, but you probably gathered that this is a serious serious nature to this conversation. But here's the thing, I've always been a bit clinical there, Lee, a bit. I always say there's a time to unleash your inner sociopath and just go, oh yeah, okay, and that's it. Job. It's not being heartless. It's that life's hard enough as it is without getting emotional about other people's shit. It's not being callous or hard. It's like I've got my stuff to deal with. You couldn't take on board. I mean, it was emotionally draining as it was, especially when you're doing like child protection stuff. And you got you got to work in a panel, and you're doing your best to keep the family together, and people aren't playing ball, and people are lying to you and cheating, and the other workers are difficult. They don't understand your perspective because they're all trained in, say, for example, it might be medicine, or it might be the law if they're a police officer, or education if it's the headmistress, and they don't get the complexity of addiction, basically. And it was hectic enough, Lee. And
it is very true, though, Chris. You can't take on everybody's problems, can you? That's you'd never be able to function if you did.
Yeah, and there's too many problems in the world, full stop, to be taking it on. I mean, it bugs me what's going on with the skies when you look up and you've got these weird skies and you don't know what the hell's coming down on you, and it's ruined another what should be a beautiful summer's day. Da 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 da. And but here's the thing, you know, you got your one life to be getting on with. You can't be getting upset about anything. You know,
Yeah.
unnecessarily. You can have an avid interest in stuff, but ultimately, there's nothing to be gained by becoming mentally unwell, is there?
But you can become obsessed as well, can't you? Like, I think during COVID, in the early stage of COVID, I was obsessed. I was obsessed with, I was fighting with people every single day because I just didn't see it. I didn't see what was going on. I didn't see the correlation between what I was being told by other people on social media who weren't inside it. And I was fighting every day. I was absolutely obsessed with it. And I lost loads of friends through it. People who I'm starting to kind of get back, even for like family members and stuff, I ruined relationships with, or we ruined relationships with each other. And I think I'm starting to get that back because I'm coming on board to exactly what you've just said there. You can offer an opinion, you can give an insightful opinion, you can give an opinion which is coming off the back of your knowledge or your experience, but people don't have to take it. And I just presumed a bit arrogantly that because I was the only medic that I knew, everybody was just going to take my opinion because they knew me and they know I'm a good doctor. They see me, they see what I'm like in work. And I just presumed everyone was going to listen to me. And it was like, that wasn't the case because people have different mechanisms to deal with situations as well, don't they? And I think their mechanism might be completely different from you. They might just like burying their head in the sand and forgetting everything. I'm not like that. I like to know what's going on and why it's going on. I like to challenge things, but I've always been like that. But then the people who I was arguing with, I look at them and I think they've never been like that. They were good in school. They got out of school. They done what they should have done in school. They went into work. They done what they should have done in work. They got the promotion. They've always been like that. They're different people than me. And I think that's life, isn't it? People are different. You can give an opinion, you can tell people, you can try and help people out, you can try and lead people, but you can't force them into your way of thinking. And I think if you do, and if you become obsessed with one thing, like you were saying about the weather, I know people who are obsessed with that, and that's like their whole thing is that, and they fall out with people, they argue with people all the time, they lose friends. But you're never going to change people. You're never going to make everybody think the same as you are. Yeah.
On the other hand, Lee, and I was chatting about this yesterday. I can't even remember who with. I think it was in a podcast, and we're saying, you know, there's that thing about, oh, let's agree to differ. And
I don't agree with that as well. Sorry.
it's like, hang on a sec. So I'm having a barbecue, and I've invited me, you know, people that I care and I hope care about me and my family and that. And I'm supposed to be sharing a beer, am I, with someone here that literally wanted to inject toxic shit into his kids. And when I offer an enlightened, educated opinion about what you're actually doing and the potential risks behind it, you laughed and called me like tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, and yet I'm supposed to be like, yeah, but let's not fall out. You want a beer? I'm not being nasty. All I'm saying is that it's I know we're all different, and I know at a point in my life I probably would have been like that person. You know. We all had that stuff in the military, didn't we? We didn't think twice about it because, you know, I didn't know about Louis Pasteur or Antoine Béchamp or you know, and so that's one thing. It's like, no, I don't want people. I want people around me that's like, do you know what, he's actually seen quite a lot of life, and he's a person worth listening to. You don't have to agree, but you can, you know, do him the respect of going, oh, okay. And Another example of this, Lee, was there's a special forces chap. We've had him on the show 2 or 3 times, and as those boys are, they get all this massive adulation, don't they? That you and I know is completely undeserved, because if you really knew the truth about the forces, you wouldn't be hero worshipping them. But he was so vocal. Anyone that didn't want the thing was just like, and I remember I put some post out in my social media, and he came in the comments section. He said, so you know more than a virologist, Chris, do you? And what I could have replied, I didn't reply nothing, but was, no, I know like way more than a virologist does. They're basically a 24-year-old that spent 5 years in university being indoctrinated in one system, one theory of health, with let's say very selective supporting evidence to support their findings, kind of guided, you could say. Whereas in order to really understand life, you've got to have been out there and lived it. You've got to have been around a bit. Like you're telling us your experience in the military, Lee, and having a daughter that that was critically ill, and etc etc etc, and there's, it's just funny, isn't it? People still bow to that.
Well, I think for me, Chris, what I meant by that is I do that now, or I'm trying to do that now, to protect myself, because I was in such a negative place myself, because I just basically hated everyone. I was like, I can't stand them. I can't, because the frustration you had, I had the exact same frustration, because I was coming from the same side as you, and I was getting people who I know for a fact had no kind of background in it, or not even just, I'm not being arrogant, I'm not saying I was a doctor so I should know more, obviously, because you've just pointed out that from a doctor you're seeing selective evidence, and you're seeing selective evidence fed to you. So it's you've got to be able to look outside that and look at different and approaches to medicine, which is what I do. But the fact that I do have a higher level of education than I would have when I was in the force, it means I can critically analyze things better than I would have been able to then. Doesn't mean I'm always right, but it means that I have the ability to be able to critically analyze things. I have the underpinning knowledge for certain conditions and stuff, and how lungs work effectively. So I was putting forward an argument to people I know for a fact I've got no interest in this. It's not even that they've got no education. They've got no interest. They've never expressed an interest in health matters, in food or anything, but they just listen to the narrative of the mainstream media. So they're calling me a conspiracy theorist. I'm putting in a 10,000 word essay on Facebook about, you've got to look at this different picture, because you've got to look at how things interact with the ACE inhibitors on the lung, whatever, and it causes local inflammation and reaction, whatever. And I'm putting it aside across, and then you're getting back, you're a conspiracy theorist, in like 2 or 3 words, just dismissing everything you've just said. And it was just so frustrating for me that it nearly drove me round the bend again. I was like, what the hell? So when I understand your frustration, and for me, I had people who said to me wife things about, you're all right mentally, because she was disagreeing with what they were saying, and they were like, do you feel like you might need some kind of mental health input, because she was going against what was being told on the media. So, and then people majorly offended us, obviously, and I'm not just saying live and let live, but in order to protect myself and to stop myself living in that cycle of negativity, I've tried my best to come out of it and just say, do you know what? I'm just going to draw the line with them on them certain things. I'm never going to sit back and keep my mouth shut, because that's not what I do. I've never done that in my life, and I never will. And I'll never just be shouted down. I'll never be like, because you get the old classic, did you see that on the telly the other day? And, Boris was saying such and such. And then you say, well, actually, that's not the case. And we don't want to talk about politics. after they've just got the opinion in, and you're like, you get all that. So then I'm never going to just keep my mouth shut and say, oh, you know what, I'm not getting involved, because that's not me. But I think for self-preservation, again, I feel like after that I had to do something, kind of had to try and draw a line under it with certain people who I can't avoid, should we say.
I remember years ago, I think it was when I was in uni, I was doing some lecture essay, and I got this book from the library, and it's quite, all the books in education are all pretty cherry picked, aren't they? You're never going to give an alternative view to things. But this one book, there was a little tiny little paragraph in it, or one sentence or so, and it said the same three corporations own like 80% of the media channels around the world. and this was before I was really like awake, and certainly before I was enlightened. But even then I thought, so the media, it's all Mickey Mouse, and it's just propaganda by the corporate psychopaths. Yeah, I get. And I carried that for years. But here's the thing. If you hadn't ever read any books, you got no chance of learning stuff like that, or if the books you've only ever read are like Andy McNab, no disrespect to Andy, but or some romantic novel or something, or Harry Potter, it's like you're not going to learn stuff. Just that little thing alone just had a real big effect on my outlook in life, Lee.
Do you know what changed me? I think I'd always questioned that. Like, I don't ever really remember like believing in things like Father Christmas and stuff, or God, when I was a kid. I never remember believing in anything like that, like organised religion or anything. But my mum bought me a book. I think it must have been about 1997 or 1998 or something. And she gave me a David Icke book. And I read, and at the time, David Icke was considered to be a complete lunatic. He'd been on Terry Wogan with the purple shell suit, and everyone thought he was having a psychotic episode. And I remember reading this book and thinking, actually, a lot of that, what he's saying is true. Because he talked about things like the media being run and controlled, and there being an agenda behind things. And you're like, actually, a lot of what he's saying here, and this was back in like 97, I was a soldier at the time. And I was thinking, and everyone thought I was a nut job because I was reading David Icke. But I remember just thinking, do you know what? And then I looked out for things after that. Things triggered with me, and then I'd see things in the media and be like, that's actually what I read back then. And that's always helped me to question things, I think. Or it's always made me question things that I'm seeing officially. And that leads, sorry, go on, Chris, sorry.
No, go on, mate.
So that leads kind of to the title of my book and to my nickname, Dr. Magnesium. So the reason I get called Dr. Magnesium is there's a lot of people in medicine who do try alternative things and who will try things and try different ways of managing. So when I worked in a cardiothoracic centre, we used to do bypass grafts. So we do coronary artery bypass grafts. And when you'd handle a heart, or when the heart restarts, the actual manual handling of the heart, or the electrolyte imbalance in the blood after it, causes a lot of people to go into atrial fibrillation or into like a tachyarrhythmia. So what we used to do, before we'd give anyone medicine, we'd give them magnesium. So we'd just try it. It was like a bit of a trial going on at the time or something. So we just whacked them full of magnesium, just a normal salt, magnesium sulfate. And it worked. So then after I left that cardiothoracic centre, if I got a patient coming in an AF, I go, yeah, I've seen that work in a cardiothoracic centre, so I'm going to do it. So I give people magnesium. So people are like, are you mad? Why are you giving someone a salt when they're going into AF, you need bisoprolol, you need the Joxon or whatever, flecainide, whatever, amiodarone if it's bad. But they're all like, especially like amiodarone, they're toxic medications and cause damage to the rest of the body. So why not try something that's relatively safe and that is natural? It occurs in nature. Why not try that? So then I started doing, and that's kind of where the people used to go, here he is, Dr. Magnesium. Probably a little bit derogatory at first, but then I've seen it work so many times that I still do it to today. I still give people magnesium when they're in AF and stuff like that. And it's this is where you're so conditioned. This is where you're saying about selective evidence and selective reporting. If people get a condition called torsades de pointes, it means that so basically you can either be, your heart can beat too fast from the top or it can beat too fast from the bottom. If it beats too fast from the bottom, it's a lot more dangerous than when it beats from the top, because you lose cardiac output. Your heart doesn't have time to fill up with blood and push out, so you don't oxygenate your brain, you don't oxygenate tissues, your organs, whatever. So a ventricular tachycardia is a lot more dangerous than an atrial tachycardia, so the bottom. So what we do is when somebody's in prolonged QTC, so that means basically the contraction of the bottom heart prolonged, it's going longer and longer and longer with every beat. You often get a refractory ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation where the bottom of the heart just goes out of sync and it can't beat. And we give magnesium for that. And it's standard practice. It's evidence-based. We've always done it. But so I couldn't get my head around why people would be so open to giving magnesium to control the rate at the bottom of the heart. Yet, if you give it to control the rate at the top of the heart, which is the same tissue, it's the same cells, then you're a lunatic or you're a bit of a medical conspiracy theorist. It's just that selective bias. It's insane.
I remember the last time we talked, when we're chatting about diet, and your thing is obviously eating whole foods.
Yeah.
And my thing is always to people, it's not so much what you eat, it's whether your tissues are out, have got the right pH balance. And then I went away and I was thinking about our chat, and I was just thinking that, well, if you're eating, because the misleading thing there is when we think about whole foods, it's tempting to mistake that for like whole grains and stuff, and whole wheat pasta and but in its true sense, if you just eat whole food that you could pick in the nature or catch in the nature, that would be very alkalizing on the body. That would be it's just our sort of natural diet, is it not?
Yeah, we're not meant to eat milled. I think they didn't mill and come out until 10,000 years ago in order to keep people in one area, so you could keep people did that because we were hunter-gatherers. In order to enable us to establish settlements, they started to mill and make breads and pastas and things, which is just artificial crap that you're not meant to eat. It's just like feeding cows or pigs oats or something. It's just something that fatten them up and keep the bellies full, but it has no real nutritional benefit. And I think that I haven't really looked into it for years, but I'm pretty sure that's where it started.
Yeah, it's quite simple. The factory produced grains and rices and wheats and stuff like, well, wheat is a grain, well, rice is a grain, I suppose. It's a very modern thing, isn't it? It's only when you got the industrial techniques to plant loads of fields full of grain and then harvest them in a wanna like that. Kind of like if we lived in our natural environment, if you wanted to say have wheat, you'd probably have to search for it for a week, wouldn't you? And then you might find like a few stalks of it on the riverbank or something, and then you might find another few stalks on the edge of the forest, and that's taking you a few days, and you've got enough wheat to, I don't know, like a matchstick's worth. Whereas now, if you want to have like bread, you can have thousands of grains in that piece of bread alone that would take you probably 2 or 3 years to get in, and it's out of sync for us. And the glucose spike that comes from carbohydrates just flushes our body, full of sugars basically, and the sugars are acidic in the body, as we know, because sugar can rot through your teeth. And I was just thinking we could explore that a bit more, because I'm massive on, staying alkaline through chlorophyll, so green plants basically. And I have a green smoothie every day with a few spoons of this green powder, and then when I test myself with the strips, the pH strips, it always comes up, I'm pH neutral basically, so my body's not carrying loads of acid. And sorry, to get back to your point, Lee, what would you substitute the carbohydrates for then? Because this is a difficult one. I still eat a lot of carbohydrate, but the thing is, because I have the green powder, it offsets it. So when you look, you can see there, when I test myself, I'm way up in the greens. Like I'm 7.25, which is what your body's supposed to be. Whereas when I do this with people that have got no clue about what I've just said, I'll say, get yourself them strips. They're £3 on eBay. They're like, Chris, I'm red. What does that mean? You're a Westerner. You eat toxic carbohydrate diet. Oh, is that bad? Well, you tell me. Your body, all the blood running through your veins is acidic. All the liquid in your cells is acidic. Do you think that's going to end well? And when you put it like that, it's like, yeah. So
have you looked into like lectins and all that then as well? Have you, with them like red fruits and red? Because I've kind of heard of it, but I've never really looked into it. Because that's acidic, isn't it? The red colouring in.
Oh, okay. Lee, I'll just keep it really simple, right? And I'm not obsessive or anything. I eat like this because I know it works. I don't like being ill. I hate being ill, and I haven't been ill for 23 years now. So when I see people and they're all ill, I wish they knew that that's your choice. I know it's not a choice if you don't know the information. But what I mean is, I wish people knew you have a choice whether you get ill or not. And it's to do with your, in my experience, your dietary habits. And I just picture it like this. If you're gatherers living in the forest, hunter-gatherers, you think about the food that you would eat on a daily basis. So when you came out your cave in the morning and you've got a clan to feed, certainly you got, some offspring, like, what you're going to do? Well, you're going to start wandering through the forest, aren't you? You're going to this is your new food ground. When it's all used up, or the season changes, you move to another one, don't you? Or you move to a different climate where, when it starts to snow in the north, you start to move south and this sort of thing. Well, what would you eat? You wouldn't have a bowl of rice because it wasn't invented, and therefore you can almost like directly extrapolate from that rice isn't going to be good for you, because you're not supposed to eat 3,000 grains at a time of a plant that actually comes from Asia. It's the same thing with, would you walk out your cave and grab a deer and just eat that? Well, yes, you'd catch deer, but you'd have to go out on hunting parties. You'd have to persistence hunt, which meant running after this creature for probably 2-3 days until it got exhausted and it keeled over. And, then you take that meat back and the tribe would all share it out. We got this notion that our ancestors sat there eating all this meat all day long. And I'm not saying that, you shouldn't eat meat or anything. What I'm saying is, way more likely your ancestors came out of the cave, they went to the blackberry bush over there, gathered a big handful of blackberries, they went to the stinging nettles over there, shredded a load of leaves enough to feed 5 people. They picked up the fungi growing on that tree stump there. There's hazelnuts on that tree over. Well, all of this stuff, Lee, it's alkalizing in the body. It doesn't create acid. It's in balance with our natural selves. And when you get the odd glucose spike, so for example, you come across a bee's nest, and you share that out, and that's like your sugar, wasn't it? And that's like your sweet shop in the old days. Yeah. Well, yeah, but you'd eat that in 10 minutes, and then you probably wouldn't find another bee's nest for 3 days, 4 days, whatever, because once you've eaten all the honey from the bee, then you got to go like 30 miles to get the next one, 40 miles, so everything's in balance. It's just that simple. So I say to people, think about what you eat. Would you eat it in the nature? Would you have sugar-rich mangoes, packed full of fructose, just sugar, when really they grow like once a year in Africa? Would you have
as well? So me wife, I wish me wife, you could get me wife on here. She's absolutely amazing at all this food stuff, but she'd never. She's very camera shy. She'd never go on, but her job is food development, and she's basically works with governments to try and remove ultra processed food out of school meals and like national meals and stuff like that. So she's trying to devise diets which are convenient. You make like bags that you cook with all ultra processed free food, and she's always saying about seasonal variation as well. And you've just hit the nail on the head where you said about the mango, where it grows once a year. She was saying about there's a reason that fruit gets sweeter at certain times in the season. It's because you need to eat that fruit at that time, because you would naturally be short of something by that time in the season. So fruit would ripen and would get sweeter at that time because that's what you needed. And it's exactly what you've just said. So you would get that burst of whatever that fruit contains at that time when you need that fruit. And then that would go, and you wouldn't see that again until next year. So you'd eat seasonally as well, which we don't do anymore. We get like strawberries flew in from like the Middle East and Egypt and stuff in the winter.
Absolutely.
Sugar-rich fruits in the winter.
What I wanted to ask you, Lee, is so if you're not having the chips and the pasta and the baked potatoes are all right. I suppose that's a single. That's not processed, but the pasta, the rice, what?
So I eat green veg, like you've just said yourself. So I would eat small amounts of potatoes and stuff like that. Also, in the morning, say I normally just eat fruit like a banana or something in the morning, one banana with a cup of coffee or something, and then throughout the day I would just tend to eat jacket potato with a bit of cheese in or something, and then just a normal meal. I just have like a fish or a bit of meat with loads of veg and 1 or 2 small potatoes or something. And snacks, I would eat like dates and nuts and stuff like that. I eat a lot of nuts. So I just eat, and berries as well. I eat a lot of berries. I used to eat a lot of like citrus fruits, but obviously I noticed with that you're getting like heartburn and stuff, and you think, well, that's not right, is it? So I don't eat as much citrus fruits now. I tend to eat more like berries, and I don't like sweet apples either. I like more like seasonal apples as well, because you get a lot of sweet apples and out of season and stuff, don't you? So I just tend to eat whole natural foods, like what you were saying, like a kind of whatever's in season, fruit and veg wise, with meat and occasional small potatoes. And you can eat bread, you can eat like sourdough breads and stuff like that as well, but obviously you don't want to be hammering them. But maybe a bit of scrambled egg on sourdough toast or something now and again as well. And I don't really eat chocolate, but I have now and again. I'll have a little bit of chocolate now because I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke, don't take any illicit substances. So you've got to have some small pleasure in life, haven't you? So I'll have a little bit of chocolate now and again. But
what do you think then when you walk in a hospital, you walk through the foyer and you got like a Costa coffee there on the right. You got some place selling shitty pastries and sausage rolls on the left. Then you got a WH Smith full of sweets and fizzy drinks, and then you get on a ward, and these people, you know, they're in a poor state of health, and they're getting this just overcooked slop. What's your thoughts on that?
It's horrendous. So this is where my whole thing, and this is how I had the conversation with last time about those processed foods, and I think the whole diet in a hospital is possibly, you couldn't design a worse diet in order to improve health than what they give you in hospital. If it's not full of sugars or full of unnatural, out of season stuff, it's full of toxic, ultra processed food as well, which has had chemicals added into it, which causes inflammation. The last thing you need if you're in hospital unwell is a food that's going to cause inflammation somewhere, because then you divert your immune system to deal with this inflammatory causing food in your gut. So for me, looking at this is like where it all come about for me. And when my wife started looking into school dinners, we were looking at what the kids were eating, which is very similar to what they eat in nursing homes. It's very similar to what they eat in hospitals, because it's all mass-produced crap that can be served for cheap and can be travelled, it's cooked in a central area and drove out miles without going off, and then can be heated locally. So it's all rubbish. And then, as you say, you've got all the ultra processed. I think me and my wife went in to visit someone when we were really into like the early phases of ultra processed food, and we went in to see someone in hospital, and we couldn't get anything that was ultra processed free. Nothing. There's not one single thing could we get in the hospital. I think I'd gone to see a cousin or something, and it was after 6 o'clock, and there was just nothing available. And you're like, how can you have a hospital which is there to promote health selling absolutely nothing that you can eat if you don't eat those processed foods? It's just bizarre.
Oh, mate, it's like if you go, I don't know, through an airport, and you or motorway service station is probably a good example, and like you can't even get anything vegetable. You know, all the sandwiches are like white bread, or okay, yeah, of course you can get brown bread, but it's, you know, it's. I just think, you know, for people out there that eat vegan diet, they're pretty bloody screwed. No one really caters to that, do they?
But the vegan as well. So the vegan diet is possibly the worst diet you can eat for ultra processed foods. If you're eating replacements like meats replacements, if you're eating a proper vegan diet with whole food and fresh food, it's absolutely perfect. But most vegans will eat vegan cheeses, vegan meat-like products, and they're just basically reconstituted chemicals that they're eating. They're like tofu's and all stuff like that. It's not tofu's, what's the other one called? Corn and all that stuff.
Yeah. And also, the reason why vegans die the same age as carnivores or omnivores is that people think, you know, if they don't want to eat animal product, then they eat refined carbohydrate.
Yeah,
you know, macaroni and cheese, and of course they're missing out on the most fundamental point. I would say fundamental point of health is your body's pH. It's just that simple. If people understood body's pH, there's no way we would have been through that 3 years. Just no, absolutely. People would have laughed at you if you say, "Oh, what it is a bogeyman," yeah. And he goes around jumping from one person into like the other one, and then they die. It's like, no, they have to take some responsibility for how they live their life and stop blaming other people, you know. And but
that's what I always said. The elephant in the room, Jordan, all that was for me was that you're getting young people who were dying from whatever was going around at the time, but you're getting 25 to 35-year-old people who are dying in hospital. And the reason they're dying is because they've got a BMI of about 45. And you're like, that's the elephant in the room. Why aren't we addressing that? What kind of burden of on the healthcare service is that over the next? If you're got a BMI, like again, going back to my wife, she was working in Wales, and I think a third of the kids in Wales, as they come out of junior school, are obese, and that's only going to get worse. So by the time you get out to senior school, it's going to be over half are obese at 16. What kind of burden is that on the healthcare service over the next 50 years? Because people now, because people are given so much medication, they just sicker for longer, but they're not healthy. They don't live a longer, healthy life. They just live a sicker life for longer years, and they're dependent on medications. And the burden on the healthcare service for people who are obese in the teenagers is going to be phenomenal, and it's only going to get worse, isn't it? Because people are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I put that down to I know we're basically coming at the same thing from slightly different angles, because I come at it from a whole food point of perspective, but I don't think you should eat anything which is ultra processed and which is had chemicals altered. But that basically means it's pumped full of sugar, because most ultra processed foods are pumped full of salt and sugar and hydrogenated fats. So they're just full of everything that's wrong. They're designed to flood your body with sugar so that your body will use that as an immediate energy source. They're low in fibre, so it transits through your gut quicker. So your body thinks, shit, I'm going to lose all the nutrients out of this. I need to grab hold of it. And while you've got these massive sugar spikes, which, as you say, are going to become acidic further down the line. But what your body's doing then is thinking, I need to grab onto an energy source. So it pulls all the fat in, and they fill it full of hydrogenated fats. So they're pulling that in and storing it straight away into the adipose tissue. So you're getting obesity. So you can eat 3,000 calories of ultra-processed food, or you can eat 3,000 calories of whole food, and you're going to put on a lot more weight. They've done studies where you put on something like, I think it's half a kilo every 3 days or something, by eating the same number of calories but different percentages of ultra processed versus non-processed foods. So there's a lot of stuff. So we are coming out from this, we're looking at the same endpoint time, but just slightly different.
Yeah, we just got to get back to the natural, mate. That's all it is, and people have somehow, they think it's their right to eat this or their right to eat, and yeah, you have choice, of course you do, but when you're getting all defensive because someone's telling you your bottle of wine every evening is maybe going to have ramifications for you later down the line, then you got to question that, right? Then you got all this like battle between carnivores and vegans, and it's nothing about that. It's about understand your body's pH. That's it, because we can eat a whole range of stuff. We can even eat, processed stuff. Not that I'd recommend it, but if your machine isn't the pH that you're supposed to be, I mean, it's so ridiculous. You'd never feed your plants Coca-Cola. Someone's going to tell me now that there's a plant that you just feed Coca-Cola, but you just wouldn't do it. You'd never put diesel in a petrol car. You just wouldn't do it, because you recognise that mechanism, that machine, whether it's a plant or whatever, it has to be treated in a certain way. And yet when it comes to human body, we think you can have 2 litres of Coca-Cola on top of a Big Mac, and that's like all your choice. And
but that's the same with your kids, isn't it, Chris? People wouldn't give a dog Coca-Cola.
No, yeah, exactly.
That we give our kids.
Yeah, crazy. Yes. Lee, we could chat forever, brother. This has been a fascinating chat. I wanted to ask you about the guy with the grenade, but that's going to have to wait till next time now. We'll save that for the next one. I wish you all the best with your book, Dr. Magnesium. Not your usual doctor. Folks will obviously put a link for Lee's socials and his book below this video, so go and grab yourself a copy. And yeah, good chat, mate.
Brilliant, Chris. Thank you very much.
No worries. Stay on the line just so I can thank you properly. Friends at home, as always, I'm saying, could you please take a look at my Atlantic row. So I'm rowing the Atlantic in December. We pitched it as shining a light for struggling veterans, but to be honest, we're 3 of us in a boat. We've all got some form of disability, from mental health through to physical health, and we just want to say that life doesn't stop. We've been through the dark times, and there's a light out there for everyone, and we're going to row across the Atlantic and prove that. Thanks to everyone that's chipped £5 towards helping us get the boat in the water and make as much money as we can for 2 charities. One gets homeless veterans off the street and into education and housing. The other is the only, Scotty's Little Soldiers is the only source of support in this country of organisational support for bereaved service kids. And what a lot of people don't get, because they just don't get, is 40% of these kids' parents committed suicide. Sad fact of being a veteran is mental health, as Lee very rightly pointed out. So there you go. There'll be a link for our row below, folks. Just get on our Facebook page and share a few things. That, if you haven't got a £5, that'd be awesome. And that's it. Thanks to all the people that support us on Patreon, locals, or have become a YouTube member. That really helps us to keep going. I've said enough. Lee, much love to you. Stay on the line. Friends, much love to you, and we'll see you soon. Cheers, cheers.
'Cause I've been living life right like I could just die